You good?
Yeah. All right, so this is a short I did recently, and I figured I'd talk a little bit about it. So I've made shorts before, but for this one, I decided to do things a little different. For this one, I wrote and created it all entirely by myself. No crew, no actors, no friends or partners to collaborate with, just me. And I did that for two reasons. The first is because, truthfully, I needed a sort of creative reset. Now, I'm fortunate because I have a job that allows me to edit commercials for TV and radio and internet content on a daily basis, but I had to go through this difficult lesson that just because it's creative doesn't always mean that it's going to satisfy your creative itch, so to speak. With client requests and the day-to-day needs that have to be met, the creative process can often feel and honestly be just as mundane as any other job because it is possible to get stuck in this routine. And creatively, that can be pretty scary because you're always trying to think outside the box, and when you're stuck in what feels like this never-ending cycle of just the same type of jobs, it can start to feel like there's not really an escape. Which isn't to say that there aren't plenty of advertising jobs that come through that aren't loads of fun to create, because there totally are. It's just, I've learned that my passion is really more in narrative films. I've spoken to a lot of creatives, and some have expressed this idea of like, well, you make one for them and then you make one for you. But the truth is I'm never really thinking in terms of, am I making it for me or am I making it for someone else? I'm just making it because it feels right for now. So in regards to this particular short, the concept came at a time when I was feeling pretty burnt out. The responsibilities of the day-to-day routine were just beginning to exhaust my creative motivations, and to top it off, in recent years I've kind of developed this severe case of anxiety and depression that can often just come out of almost nowhere. For me, I've learned that diving headfirst into something that's creative and that really challenges my skill set really helps keep those conditions away. But at the time, I wasn't really feeling like I was exercising those creative muscles. Needless to say, when the creative work that I was doing during the day wasn't really hitting the mark, it started having a severe effect on my overall mental health. Around that time, I started thinking about creating another short because in my head, the only thing that was going to jolt me out of feeling the way that I was feeling was creating something new and different than I had ever done before. And to be honest, I'm not that into horror films. I mean, there are, of course, exceptions and plenty of films in the genre that I absolutely just adore, but I've never really tried my hand at it before. Well, unless you count this.
You! Isaac! Why'd you do this? No! Why'd you do this? No!
But, don't count that. So a lot of the short was inspired by the things that surrounded me at the time. I was alone in an empty office a lot with nothing more than just these deadlines dictating my every move. I'd hear lots of creaking and creepy noises throughout the office. I was never really sure if someone was coming into the office or if the air conditioning was turning on. Point is, a lot of inspiration and ideas came from being alone in this space, so I figured what better location to use. I started mapping out the structure of the short, and I quickly came to understand how much effort it was going to take to pull off, and that brings me to reason number 2. I realized that if I truly wanted to challenge myself, then the ultimate exercise would be to do everything myself. But also because I've seen a lot of people say that they can't make things because they don't have any friends or anyone to help out, and I guess I was just tired of using that as an excuse for myself. When I finally had the thought, I kind of just realized that it was my only shot, so I took the leap. One of the things that I had challenged myself with was creating the short to appear that it was made by a crew of people rather than just me by myself. The way I tackled that was just honestly shooting it slightly different than I would have had I had a full crew and actors to assist. I think personally, when it comes to filming by yourself, I think it all just comes down to having an extreme level of patience and finding the right composition for your specific shot. Full disclosure, I did use a motion controlled slider, but honestly I found myself not really using it the more the project went on, simply because I was either discovering other ideas or other methods to achieve similar results that I was getting with the slider. Which is another thing that I really wanted to showcase, that you don't have to use big expensive gear to get great engaging shots that help serve the story that you're telling. For example, with this shot, this is actually 2 different takes, both captured from a tripod. I animated both the door layer on top and the elevator layer to increase in scale, but I had the keyframes timed slightly off from each other in order to provide this parallax of motion and create the illusion of a dolly move. Obviously, this effect works best when there's something in the foreground, but you get the idea. Now, I wanted to set up early on that the character was the last one in the office, as well as establish an atmosphere where the audience could believe other workers are normally there. So I had this shot where our lead character interacts with another employee as they leave for the night. It's really just a split screen where I acted out both parts and added them in the frame together. The co-worker's voice is also mine. I just played around with and tweaked some audio effects in post to get a deeper voice. The bathroom sequence was filmed in a similar way. I performed the scene and reacted to a slamming door that didn't actually happen. Then in a separate take, I slowly opened the door and slammed it at the right time. The speed of the door wasn't really working for me though, so I sped it up a bit in post and then painted myself out of the shot. The mirror was one of the ones that utilized the motorized slider. For the pan and the tilt, I just shot a little bit wider than I knew I'd need, and I animated keyframes to move up to where I wanted. The lights flickering were just some animated levels on a masked layer, and the camera was painted out like the previous shot. One of my favorite effects in the short is the there and back again whip pan shot when the character realizes that his keys aren't where he left them. The reason it's one of my favorites is because it was done without any fancy gear, just me and the camera and a tripod. Like most of the VFX in this film, it was done with more than one take. First, I filmed the desk and I whip panned up to where the character would be standing. After a few takes of getting the whip pan and the focus just right, I locked the camera on its beginning frame as it would appear in the short, and then I stepped in and performed the character's action. In post, I cut myself out and tracked it into the first shot. Now, with something like this, I do recommend that you shoot a little wider than you'd actually want because you may lose some of the character's body in the pan. In my case, I just had to paint it back in. Now, it's not perfect and I totally could have fixed it, but I actually kind of like that it lends itself to this really low budget, messy look when you notice it. I finished it off by adding some animated tilt-ups when the character steps into frame to bring in some camera movement, and there's a shot. So I mentioned the lights flickering in the bathroom having been a levels keyframe animation, which is a technique that I used a couple of times during the project, but a lot of the lights flickering in the short is actually completely practical, inexpensive, and even in some cases completely free. So let's talk about that. Like for this shot, I used a switch plug cord that I bought from my local appliance store for about $7. Once your desired appliance is plugged in, you just can cut that power by simply flipping the switch on the handle. In this shot, I'm actually holding the cord in my hand and I flicker it on and off until I reach my mark and I'm ready for the light to go out. The same premise was applied to this shot where the character is trying to get the key out of the door. In reality, I'm actually just flickering the lights on and off using the switch plug cord, which was running underneath the door and plugged into the lamp closest to the entryway. Now, as for the free option of flickering lamps, it's not as exciting when you're shooting it, but it can be really effective. I just went through each light one by one, turning one off and the other on, and then another light off and then the other on, and on and on. What you see in the final shot is just simply a bunch of takes quickly cutting together, one after another. Now, one shot that is hopefully shocking is the one that I kind of nicknamed the ghost pool when I was shooting it. Now, I'm reluctant to even talk about this one because it can be so unsafe, so I'm just going to kind of speed through it really quickly. Essentially, I tied a rope to my body, I hid it all underneath my clothes, I tied myself to the wall, and I ran in the opposite direction. Once in post, I rotoscoped the first few frames of me falling, and I animated a scale backwards and upwards to simulate that I was being pulled back and up into the elevator. Probably the most complicated shot in the short is the one where the character is being held up and choked by the ghostly creature. First off, for the feet shot, I'm simply sitting down and kicking my feet in a way that sells a choking motion. Then I grabbed a clean plate of the wall and rotoscoped around the feet to make it appear that the feet were dangling in midair. For the wide, it was once again several takes combined into one. The takes originally looked like this. For the top half of the body, I'm standing on some apple boxes to achieve the desired height that I was looking for, and I performed the action that I was being suffocated in midair. Then I removed the apple boxes, jumped up and held my legs in this floating kicking action. Then I grabbed a clean plate of the elevator. Once all those assets are captured, you just take them into post, mask and remove all the things you don't want, and keep the things you do. This is another shot without any fancy gear, by the way. Just me and the camera and a tripod and some stuff holding me up. Animate a bit of scale and position, bring in some textures with some offset keyframes, and there's the shot. The creature at the end of the short is just a bunch of photoshopped images and textures animated together. I grabbed some extremely flattering references of myself in the space, and then I photoshopped just the hell out of it. The zooming in through the eye shot is probably my favorite one in the short, and there really isn't much to it, to be honest. I stuck the camera very close to my eye, and I stood there for just about a minute making reactions into the lens, making very sure to not move too much or go out of focus, which I did. But once I got a good take, I took it into post, created a camera zoom into the eye, and I took the photoshopped creature shot that I had animated, and then I hand tracked it into the first shot. Once combined, we get to see what the character is seeing through his eyes. It's pretty sweet. And finally, I wanted the setting of the short to take place in a city where there's a lot going on, because when I'm feeling isolated, I often feel like I'm stuck and the world around me just kind of continues moving along without me, which kind of just adds to this idea that the feeling is never going away. But in reality, I don't actually work in an overly busy or heavily pedestrianized part of the city. In fact, I don't live in New York City at all, so I purchased a few clips online. Utilizing stock footage to create an atmosphere or establish a location is a great way to add some production value to your extremely low budget or no budget project. It can also help out with story, like establishing that your character is several stories high in a New York City building and not on the third floor of a 4-story building like it was when you filmed it. So that's why his instinct is to take the elevator first, okay? So get off my back. Now, while this project was incredibly challenging to create, that's pretty much all it was ever really meant to be. I challenged myself to create a short that was 3 things. 1, kind of scary. 2, seemingly made by a crew of people rather than just me by myself. And 3, one that could help me escape the place that I was in. The experience of making a film alone was great and very eye-opening, but it was also incredibly lonely at times. I mean, more than ever before, I was truly asking myself who I was making the content for, and I realized the answer can sometimes be that I'm making it for me. And in that regard, I guess I succeeded.
I'm seeing everything through brand new eyes, taking in the world through different light. Thought I wasted all my life, but I think I changed my mind.